All of us up here on the bench live in different pockets of Columbus or outside of Columbus, and we had many challenges, collective challenges, getting in this morning. So we are all here, thankfully, safely, healthy. We are going to begin this morning with a presentation on Ohio's retail marketplace from Dr. Hisham Choueiki. Hisham is one of the most respected staffers of any commission across the country. I know we always feel very fortunate to have him here on a day-to-day basis. So, Dr. Choueiki, you're up.
Well, thank you, Honorable Chairman, Commissioners. Thanks for the invitation on behalf of staff to talk about retail electricity markets. Now, I always have a slide that says that my opinions are mine, not necessarily yours. Of course, unless you want them to be yours, then you're welcome to take them. So I thought before we start, if you would indulge me, I would talk a little bit about going down memory lane and talk about how we got here. So Senate Bill 3 back in 1999, the law that enabled consumers to effectively start shopping starting January 1st, 2001. It restructured the entire Ohio electric utility industry. The requirement was to unbundle electric utility service into generation, transmission, distribution. Again, enabled customers to shop, provided what was called a 5-year market development period to test the water basically, rather than throw ourselves right away into competition, that we would allow the market to develop, the competitive market to develop over a 5-year period. Initially, we saw some shopping, we observed some shopping in northern Ohio, and very little to none shopping in the rest of the state. Now, what was successful from the outset was government aggregation. That was a successful story. So what's unbundling? Unbundling is basically breaking down the electric service into 3 major components: generation, and consumers could shop for generation service; transmission, which remains regulated by FERC, it's a regulated monopoly; and distribution, which is also a regulated monopoly by the state commissions, in our case, the PUCO. Now, during the market development period, we observed that the market was not developing as fast as we wanted it, or as it was envisioned by Senate Bill 3. And then also during that time, we had the California crisis, where a bunch of utilities went bankrupt. We had the Enron scandal, market power issues. We had extreme volatility in the MISO wholesale market. Prices went up to $2,000 a megawatt hour in the summers. Now, towards the end of the development period, we also noticed that there wasn't a lot of activity. Not a lot of electric suppliers, not a lot of shopping. So there was a concern that if we were to jump into 100% competition, that might not be in the interest of Ohio consumers. So the PUCO worked with the electric utilities and stakeholders and developed rate stabilization plans, which were three-year plans that maintained the default service price, at least, for another 3 years. Then in 2008 came Senate Bill 221, and that law defined, one of the components of that law defined what a default electric generation service can be constructed under. So we had 2 choices: the electric security plan or the market rate offer plan. Now, our commission never approved from the inception, from 221, a market rate offer plan. We approved the first set of electric security plans in late 2008, early 2009. And I think right now we are on generation 3 or 4 ESPs. You can think of it as a movie, ESP1, ESP2, 3, where some of them is 4. And believe me, they were long, long movies, those electric security plans. So the Ohio EDUs transitioned into providing the default service with a 100% procurement from the wholesale market. Now, we had different utilities jumping in at different times. FirstEnergy was the first. As of June 1st, 2009, we started competitively bidding the SSO load. And for Duke, it was June 1st, 2012. 3 years later came AEP, and then another 7 months came Dayton after AEP. Now, AEP and Dayton, we transitioned them. We didn't go right away, like from SSO cost base to 100% from the wholesale market. We transitioned them over several years, but on June 1st, 2015, AEP, 100% of its SSO load came from the wholesale market, was procured from the wholesale market, and Dayton, January 1st, 2016. Now, what is available for Ohioans? In Ohio right now, we have a customer can choose the standard service offer, or they can shop. And they can shop under 2 venues, either through aggregation or through, on their own, picking an electric supplier. Let's talk a little bit about the standard service offer. So we have a team here in-house that actually before every SSO clearing auction, we build a fundamentals forecast of a clearing price. Now, this is our methodology. Not everyone uses it. There are common components like, for example, the swap and the capacity. Those are transparent forward prices that anyone can look in the commodities market, look what the forward prices are for energy, and that's about for that specific example, about 59–60% is just the energy component of the SSO price. Then you have the capacity component, which in this case is on average about 23%. So the two constitute about between 80 and 85%, just energy and capacity. And then there are other services, including ancillaries and losses. You have load following. So basically, when a supplier wins a tranche, they are not winning like an absolute magnitude of megawatts. They are winning a % of the SSO load. So they have to every day, every hour, match that demand. So when they're committing to a tranche, they're committing to a 1% of that demand, no matter what that demand is. And of course, there is risk too, because there is the risk of migration. So no one guarantees how many customers are going to be in the SSO load. You have customers that leave the SSO load, and you have customers that come back into the SSO load. So there is a risk involved, and that we built in a portion of that price for that risk. Then you have administration charges. This is like to run an office for that supplier who's going to come in and bid in these auctions. And I am proud to say that our forecasts have been, we have already forecasted about 70 SSO clearing prices. And we have a good understanding of the wholesale market, of the retail market, and we are within plus or minus 4% on average over the last 70 products that we have forecasted a clearing price for. Now, what else do we do? When we buy for the SSO load, we don't buy the entire quantity 100% for the entire year all at once. Oh, excuse me. What we do is we buy what we call that approach, the staggering and laddering. So when we buy, Christina, it's moving by itself. I'm going to keep it away from me. Oh, there we go. So when we buy 6 different products, and then we blend them together. I apologize. Do you want to take it away from me, take control? Can you do that? Or when we buy, we're buying. Thank you. we buy 6 products, and then we blend them together to come up with a blended price. The average, so there is this neat statistical property which says that the variance, we are having some equipment malfunction here. The variance of an average of outcomes is equal to the variance of the individual outcome divided by the sample size. For example, the outcome is a clearing price. Instead of buying for the entire year 100% all at once, we break it into 6 schedules. We buy 6 products and we average them. What does that mean? Well, then the variance of the average is 1/6 the variance of the individual clearing price. So we have, what we have done is reduced the volatility from year to year. Christina, can we go to the next one? Thank you. So for example, those are the actual clearing price for FirstEnergy since we started competitive bidding for the FirstEnergy non-shopping load. Prices have gone from under $45, $44 to almost $75 for different products. Now, next please. However, the way we do it is we're blending products together. So if you were to look at, those are the actual blended prices for the SSO results. And you can see that the prices are between $50 and $65. So we have reduced the variability, and then also the variability year to year is minimal, with the exception of that year 15-16, which was a very, very outlier year. That's the reason for that is, first, the price of capacity went up tremendously in the 15-16 PJM delivery year, but also there were some power plant retirements in the ATSI zone, which is the FirstEnergy zone, and that caused congestion and increased the price, that thus increased the price of capacity in the ATSI zone. It went up to like $350 a megawatt day. So that was an abnormal year, and that's why, but even with that, the way we blended the prices together, from year to year, the increase was not that drastic. Next, please. Similarly for Duke, those are the actual clearing prices, and the boxes basically tell you what we bought. Well, if it's 12, that means we bought a 12-month product. If it's 24, then we bought a 24-month product. If it's 36, we bought a 36-month product. Those are all the actual clearing prices. Next. And look at the blended prices here from 2012 all the way to the upcoming 18-19 delivery year. The prices are between, what is it, $53 and $58 or $57 and $50. So again, this demonstrates the staggering and laddering approach and how effective it is to reduce volatility for consumers year to year. Next. That's for AEP, and AEP we started again effective 100% procurement on June 1st, 2015, and we have so far, if you were to go to the next slide, the prices have just been pretty non-volatile at all for the last 4 years. And this AEP, this even includes the auction for the 18-19 delivery year. Next. For Dayton, we had, here you see 3 products that we haven't seen on the previous charts, and that's because for Dayton we started 100% auctioning of the SSO load on January 1st, 2016, so we had to go 5 months of a delivery year and then an additional 12 or 24 or 36 months. So you see a 41-month product, a 29-month product, and a 17-month product. But from then on, we are back on the schedule of 12, 24, and 36-month products. And finally, the last one, again demonstrating the low variability year to year. Although for Dayton, tomorrow is so this is our forecast. The clearing price for right now, the last year represents 68% of actual clearing prices and 32% our own forecast. Tomorrow, the auction clearing price will be next Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, the commission will authorize them or not based on what they are. Now for aggregation, again, government aggregation is very, very successful in Ohio. We've had Ohio Electric, since the inception of Senate Bill 3, we had aggregation being successful. A community passes a ballot issue, and everyone in the community will be aggregated. However, a customer who is part of an aggregated community, if they want to shop on their own, they can do so, or if they want to opt for the SSO, they can do so. These are the statistics, and I apologize. We have the data all the way to 2017, December. However, we're migrating databases, so the only data I could get is for 2016. And so what this chart represents is, out of the customers that are shopping, how many of them are aggregated? So for example, for FirstEnergy, 51% of the customers that are shopping are being aggregated. For Duke, it's about 47%, AEP Ohio about 19%, Dayton about 28%. Now, what's interesting is on the industrial side, it's de minimis, the customers who opted to stay in the aggregated community. Most of the customers, 99% of the industrial customers, are opting out and shopping on their own. Next. This is just a schematic diagram of where aggregation is concentrated in Ohio, and it's mostly in Northeast Ohio, in Southwest Ohio, and in Toledo, and then it's scattered all around, in AEP and Dayton, not as aggressive as in the Northeast and the Southwest. Third form of shopping is suppliers being provided electricity by a certified electric service provider. So as a supplier of electricity has to get certification from the PUCO. They have to go through a technical, financial, managerial test, make sure they are capable of having these three functions. And this is basically to protect consumers. Next. Those are again, I apologize here, because of the database migration, we have the data in-house for 17, but I couldn't present it for you. So the latest updated number of certified suppliers in each one of the EDUs is over here, and they're all positively going. So in 2017, I think for AEP, we have over 90 suppliers now. Next. Okay, so this is now this is the shopping data. And I'm going to go through each one of the EDUs. For FirstEnergy, so what I did is I spliced it so that you could see percent switching by megawatt hours, and then by sector, and then by customer by sector. So we can tell, for example, in FirstEnergy's, the industrials are almost 100%. 100% of the megawatt hours consumed by industrials are being shopped, although it's below 90% the number of industrial customers. So there is a small number of industrial customers that are still buying the SSO rate. However, if you were to look on the megawatt hour side, it's almost 100%. The large ones are all shopping. There are smaller ones that are still picking the SSO. The residential they're still on the same chart. The residentials, you could see they are, whether it's megawatt hours or consumers, it's about the same. The switch rate, it doesn't change, because on average, there is not a lot of variability in residential consumption as much as industrials. Industrial load, you have small industrial customers and you have very, very large industrial customers. In the commercial, it's somewhere in between. So that's why it's good to look at both the megawatt hours shopped and the number of customers who shop. Next, Duke. Similarly for Duke, so we have about 50% of the megawatt hours and a little bit more than 50% of the customers in the Duke service area are shopping. Commercials, you go up to the 80s, and then industrials, you're almost close to 100% again on the megawatt hour side. Next. AEP, same thing. You have about 30% of the megawatt hours and about 30% of the customers of the residential sector that are shopping. Then on the megawatt hours for industrials, of course, almost 100% of the megawatt hours are being shopped in AEP. Although a lot of large customers, a lot of industrial customers in the AEP still opt for the SSO rate. And finally, Dayton, similar. I mean, the fundamentals are there. Shopping is increasing. We see most of the volumes on the industrial and commercial side all shopped. On the residential side, we still see a large portion that are opting for the SSO, standard service offer. Now, so in conclusion, the electric choice is working very well. The market is developing. I mean, the statistics are there. So we can see that the market is doing very well now. It took us about 15 years to get here, but we are here now. And it's, you know, I always think because I was here when we were developing telecom competition and how we started first with basically competing on usage only. In this case, competing on consumption only. And then as the telecom grid got smarter and smarter and the concept of the open network architecture was fully developed, you started seeing more vertical services and lots of innovative services that other parties beside telecom carriers were providing on the telecommunication grid. So we are at this point now, so Power Forward is the perfect timing to be developing and examining and researching innovative services and how do you make them happen. You know, which is the first thing is now following the telecom model and looking at the open network architecture where you have a highly intelligent grid. The intelligence goes all the way to the end user. And then you have consumers empowered to transact and interact on the grid. And of course, who would be providing all these services? We're not going to call them service third party. We're going to call them innovative services providers or something like this. You can pick a very nice name for them that can also transact with the consumers and try to develop a little bit more than just electricity now. I mean, there are DER products, there are lots of innovative products that can be now sold on the electric grid. Thank you.
Sure. Question?
Thank you very much. Thanks for the great presentation. I just wanted to, you know, as we move forward, and you mentioned a few things, but I mean, do you see major legislation or major changes with the, with the commission as far as dealing with the modern grid?
I mean, I am, again, my background is in engineering, not in law, so I'm not interpreting law here or what things happen to change law. But I think the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio regulates the distribution grid. So I don't think there is a change in law needed to go power forward and have a commission develop a position paper on how it sees the electric grid evolving into the future. Again, we're talking about the distribution grid, which is a regulated monopoly under our jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hisham, thank you very much. We, generally speaking, up at the bench, we know the information that you presented, but the reason why we wanted you to present was to just sort of level set for the folks in the room, the folks who are watching at home, about what the marketplace looks like today. And the marketplace widely consists of a few categories of players. So we've got the distribution utilities that, from a retail perspective, currently serve default service load. And we've got our competitive retail community that also serve this retail function. We just wanted to have this opening dialogue to say, this is what exists now. But as we've heard on a couple of occasions during Power Forward, that may not be the rubric that makes the most sense going forward. There could be new players that enter the space. I think what we have said to Tom's point, to Tom's question, is what we have said is that in any policy doc that we put together, we're going to be suggestive to the legislature about things that they can do to help advance Ohio in this space. So thank you very much for the presentation, and again, I think we are trying to, if we're going to start a revolution, right? Which is, I think, in part what we're trying to do here through government. There are private actors out there that are, way ahead and either having developed products or having thought about, what a marketplace should look like. This was an important way to start the day. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. We are going to jump in immediately into our first panel for the day. We have a very distinguished set of speakers set for the day today. Our first two panels this morning will be entities that currently participate in the marketplace that Hisham described. And we are very, very grateful to have with us this morning Deborah Merril, who is the president and co-CEO of the FirstEnergy Group, Joe Bentley, who has been with us throughout Power Forward, Vice President and Market Business Leader from the AES U.S. Utilities, and Phil Dion, Vice President, Technology Business Development from AEP. We are going to start this morning with Deborah. So, Deborah, whenever you're ready.
Chairman, Commissioners, thank you very much for having me. I thought today what I would do is to give you a little bit of my perspective on what I've seen. I look very different, or our company looks very different. I look different too than my other panelists, but our company looks very different in that the company that I founded in 2002 in Texas, which is now in 4 countries and operating in multiple jurisdictions, is a completely competitive energy provider. So we have no generation assets, nothing, and we are 100% focused on the customer. So what I thought I would do today is to give you a little bit of the journey that I've seen in 22 years in competitive energy. And this is my second job out of college, and I started scheduling gas behind the city gates in Chicago in 1996. With Enron Access in Dublin, Ohio. So I've kind of been on this journey my entire career. And what I'll share with you as I go through this presentation, just kind of my perspective on what I see, and maybe give you some perspective as you're thinking through this Power Forward effort, which I commend you on in a great deal. But as I help you understand what I've seen in 5 countries, in competitive markets, and hopefully that will spur some discussion. So that's my goal here. So, this works now, right? Let's see. FirstEnergy. I'm going to give you a little bit of, I'm going to try not to do the sales pitch about the company, but I think this sets the stage a little bit for who you're talking to and the person in front of you, as well as what we're doing as a company. We are a company that has over 1,500 employees. We've got a headquarters in Houston as well as Toronto, so we're dual listed on the New York Stock Exchange as well as the TSX. We have about 1.5 million customers around the globe. We're currently in Canada, the US, Japan, Ireland, the UK, and Germany. So 6 countries. I forgot one. So we've, as we've grown as a company over the last 4 years, specifically internationally, we've really started to see a lot of different things and evolved on our own as well. So, like I said before, 22 years in competitive energy markets, I've seen the evolution of how retailers look at the world as well. So when I first started, it was, buy it from this person for 5 cents, buy it from that person for 5.2. It wasn't that interesting, nor compelling for a customer to do anything. So, and as I look at the journey that I've been on as a leader in the space, the big flipping point for me about 4 years ago, as I took over as co-CEO of FirstEnergy, I said, if we're going to be like everybody else and try to, compete on rate with utility and compete on rate with everything else, that is not going to be a winning strategy at all. So we had to evolve as a company as our focus and said, our strategic vision is to deliver value-added products and services and put the customer first. Now, putting the customer first is easy to say, but very hard to do culturally as a company. And I can tell you today, and I'll give you some examples, what that does when you actually put the customer first in the process. But that, to me, is really the journey that we've been on. And I think the rapidly changing technology environment that we're in today with smart meters, smart thermostats, and companies like Amazon and others that are very keen on looking at this market is really going to start to propel this in a big way. So let me just give you a little bit of my perspective on things. So if we, given technology, all the information and data, we really have an opportunity here in looking at the energy ecosystem, and if we put the customer first, what we could actually achieve. So I'll give you some examples. One is we've got a very active Net Promoter Score with our customers in measuring, understanding what they're saying about us. So the journey that we've been on, as I said before, has been how do we go from a rate, competing on rate, to really delivering a solution to a customer. So over the last several years, what we've done is we've said, okay, how can we make a customer's life easier? So we deliver weekly emails telling somebody what they used last week and what they used this week and what their bill is going to be this month. So access to that information, that data, empowers a customer to make a different choice for energy in their home. So, excuse me. So that we've seen, incredible results and incredible feedback based on that as well. We've also seen, based on access to information and data and being able to kind of really be creative for the customer. So when you start listening to the customer and asking what they actually want, then you can start solving their problems. So somebody who is really interested in solar or interested in conservation, you can start to structure products as you look at how their usage patterns work, how the data and information flows through, and the technology you can put in there, you can actually start to solve their problem. And finally, I think the last thing I would say, when you put the customer first, you start to get some loyalty. Now, as I said before, we have 1.5 million customers. We had to get every single one of those. Nobody gave us a customer. We had to, go to a customer and say, buy it from us, and have a compelling value proposition to do so. That is not an easy thing to do unless you start putting putting yourself in the customer's shoes and making it work. About a year and a half ago, we rolled out Just Energy Perks, which is a loyalty reward program for our customers that effectively helps them conserve energy and gives them points for being our customer. So every month you earn so many points, you can go on our website and buy a smart thermostat. You can buy energy efficiency products. And that really so we talk a lot about rate, but rate times volume equals your bill. So we're really trying to address both of those things. And what we've seen and how customers react has been incredible. I'll give you some examples. Let's see here. So these are some actual feedback from our customers. And one of the things that, in this business, when you're a consumer-facing company, not everybody says nice things about you all the time. So when you start doing things that they say things like, I love this company, that's an eye-opener. You actually start to say, okay, I'm doing something right. And as I read through some of these, it's, just wanted to let you know that I love receiving the weekly usage chart. It helps me see where I stand and where I can improve. I am on disability, so every penny helps. Thank you. That is somebody who actually said, I solved a problem for them by just giving them information. And again, being a competitive retailer where we have to earn every single customer, our entire focus is about how do we get a customer, how do we keep a customer, and how do we make them love us. The other one I like is, and I'm getting older, I have to get some reading glasses. This is really not good. In love with my new Wi-Fi programmable thermostat. I got it today from Just Energy. This thing is the coolest. I can remotely control from my phone or laptop. And it shows me indoor, outdoor temps as well, thanks Just Energy. So these are some of the feedback that we've gotten from customers. And this journey that we've been on, one of the things that we did, we said, we have to understand what customers say about energy. Because you think about it, most of us don't think about energy in their home very often. So about a year ago, we hired a social media listening company, and a social media company that would help us listen to what people were saying about energy in their home. And I ended up getting a 400-page document with all kinds of insights for, around the globe about what people were saying about energy and how they felt about energy in their home. And if you look at the bottom of this slide, as we boiled it down to one global insight, what we saw is that the way customers were speaking about energy is they said, I want to feel smart and in the know, and I'm making a difference to those who matter most. Sometimes managing everything at home can feel complicated and overwhelming, and I just want a partner and a solution I can trust. That's as we boil down the entire study, that's really what the gist of what people were saying. And I'll give you a little bit of, consumers are driving what's happening. So I'm not a genius when I say, we need to put the customer first. We need to measure how the customer feels about us. We need to solve their problems. That should be our North Star. That's not, this is based on trends and what consumers are demanding. So you think about what you used to expect, getting a taxi versus what I expect now on my app in real time and no hassle and competitive. So I think that, we have to keep this in the context of the entire world is changing, the consumer's changing, and how they expect services to be delivered and what they expect to get from their suppliers. So if I try to get to one point of this, data really, and access to data really enables innovation. So there's a great example, one of the Ontario province in Canada, they have smart meters, but the data doesn't go anywhere. So it made the investment, but it's incredibly frustrating to me because I think consumers could benefit so much from understanding usage patterns. They don't need to do it. We have the technology, information, and the know-how to do it, and we want to basically say, hey, give us the information, let us find a solution, let us see the problem and find the solution. And that really is a really key thing. And having the ability to connect directly with the customer, because, if you imagine, if I have 4 boxes that I can fill out for a bill for a customer, that's very difficult when I'm trying to do a product that nobody's thought of. So having access and supplier consolidated billing and access to data is really critical, I think, for this new environment that we're working in. So, and I guess what can it look like, right? So, this is just one example where free-flowing information, you still have the data controls and the quality and all that stuff, but you really have to look at some of the things that have happened as these things evolve. We've got free night solar days in Texas. So, the amount of innovation and the stuff that the people try to say, hey, this is good for you because you are a consumer who cares about the environment. You are a consumer that is willing to pay this for that. So that really is a really important thing for us to think to see what the results have actually been. And finally, I'll say that really these technologies, as Hisham talked about earlier, they're coming. They're here. We have an entire group that does nothing but does product testing and social listening and understanding how these products actually help customers. And I think that markets that structure in the right way will really have innovation happening, and really consumers will benefit greatly from it. And I'll say that, as I think about our competitors, and as a standalone retail energy provider, I think very little about people who look like me. I think about Amazon, Apple, because they are very interested in this space. Energy is one of the core products of their smart home and how they're trying to connect with customers. So I think, change is going to happen, and we're going to see a lot of disruption, and I think that it'll be a really good thing for the consumer in the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Joe?
Good morning. DPL is delighted to be back at this 3rd Power Forward Conference, and I hope I'm not wearing out my welcome. In fact, I think with the weather today, a 3-hour drive from Dayton to Columbus. I think somebody was trying to tell me something, but again, I want to thank Chairman Hawk and Commissioner Trumbull for the invitation today and for this Power Forward initiative, and all the commissioners and staff for their vision for the future of Ohioans. The theme of my presentation today is customer-driven innovation, and this panel will be focusing in on distribution system market opportunities and participants. I'd like to paraphrase, and I hope this presentation builds upon an insightful comment made on Tuesday by one of the presenters. The comment was, today, the meter is merely an artificial barrier. So we need to really move beyond just providing kilowatt hours and really need to focus on the main objective of serving our customers and help make their lives more convenient. So our mission at DPL is pretty straightforward: serving lives by providing safe, reliable, and sustainable energy solutions in the communities we serve. I'll tell you, it is still paramount for us to provide, safe and reliable electricity. But for today's discussion, I'm going to focus more on the words sustainable energy solutions. So this graphic was presented on Tuesday in the system planning panel. And during that discussion, the focus was more on the first two building blocks. With my presentation today, I'm going to start with building block number 2, the enabling technologies, and move to the right and focus in on customer applications and market transformations. However, the key to all of these building blocks are really looking at them through the lens of the customer and not just looking at the last two as being customer-centric. Distribution utilities provide a vital role in enabling the development and ubiquitous integration of products and services within the distribution ecosystem. With more and more of the disparate equipment and technologies that will be added in the future, it is imperative that the utilities have the visibility across the entire distribution system. With this in mind, the utilities should be intimately integrated and involved in the development of those innovative products and services. Now, I think one of the other speakers had made a reference, the building blocks are kind of backwards. While that may be a provocative statement, we're calling them the building blocks for a reason. One builds on the other, and the customer benefits build and are central to each other. Without the first two fundamental building blocks, the necessary stabilization of the distribution system and providing third parties and delivering future convenience for customers would not be achieved without those first two building blocks. So as we look at the grid, as we all know, our distribution grid is changing. Technology is changing, and the customer expectations continue to increase. The distribution grid has typically been that one-way linear system, essentially from the substation to the home. And by all accounts, that system has served us extremely well for decades. As the distribution grid evolves to accommodate applications such as distributed energy resources, utilities are uniquely positioned to install the foundational technologies that make innovation possible and integrate the individual pieces to maintain that reliable system. So my colleague Kevin Hall coined the phrase on Tuesday, the custodian of the distribution system. In addition to the foundational elements of safety and reliability, we also have the focus of scale, convenience, simplicity, efficiency, and the democratization of service. As the custodian of the provider of last resort, we want to make sure that the customer convenience and benefits afforded by smart grid are enjoyed by all of our customers. So similar to the Staples commercial, utilities bring that red easy button for customers, whether that be 99.9% reliability, ease of billing, and or the customer service representatives that are answering our questions and our customers' questions. Utilities can bring that simplicity and convenience to customers as the grid becomes more networked in the future. As I've discussed at this Power Forward in the past, reliably integrating technology and renewables in the distribution system is not aspirational. Several from the PUCO witnessed how the integration of distribution technologies like DMS and OMS, working in concert with the automated metering in Indianapolis, can and does provide meaningful and tangible benefits for customers. We demonstrated how 100 megawatts of solar can be seamlessly and reliably integrated and aligned with that traditional one-way linear distribution system. Globally, AES, our parent, has a proven track record of providing sustainable energy solutions in a variety of markets and regulatory structures. This includes solar, energy storage, wind, and combinations thereof. And DPL and its parent are prepared to bring those solutions here to Ohio. So as part of a global AES, we've seen a preview of what's possible on the grid. The distribution market will be the dynamic and full of new products. The utilities are a natural and mandatory player in these opportunities. When I look into my crystal ball, I see lots of customer-centered conveniences coming. Some will be simple, like smart streetlights that help with safety and traffic, gunshot detection for safety as well, or just electric vehicle charging as we go forward. The real-time analytics will empower our customers or third parties to provide and to really to help us make and our customers make smart decisions going forward. So we heard this week what customers want. They want lights. They want heating and cooling. They want their devices to work. I would also suggest they want to come with a level also of affordability. We've also heard that customers are not the same. Baby boomers will have different needs and wants, than the millennials. Then we'll also have the Gen Xers will have different views than essentially the millennials. So this is where the variety of electrification application and meeting certain needs today will help us meet additional needs in the future. Everything from electric vehicles and their charging requirements to applications that haven't even been dreamed up or developed yet. The distribution system will have a set of demands placed on it that will add levels of complexity to the planning, operation, and maintenance of it. Certainly, the blocking and tackling will be of the utmost importance to ensure the expected reliability and resiliency of the grid. We also believe that the use of a grid evolves, there will be the evolution of markets, products, and services. We believe that there will be roles and opportunities for the current industry providers, whether the EDUs, whether they're current competitive suppliers, as well as other participants that will emerge in the market. Just as important how the grid will change to accommodate the things that customers want, DPL will need to ensure we have the regulatory framework and structure so that we can accommodate those demands and changes with both speed and agility. So in closing, if I circle back to the opening and the building blocks, we have a great opportunity to leverage Power Forward to a platform for economic growth in Ohio that delivers tangible and sustainable benefits to customers. In the market's environment, customer convenience should be our driver, and the means the utility is one of those entities offering those options in the regulated space. Now, I want to be careful. It doesn't mean that third parties can't offer those services going forward. However, what it does mean is that customers get to choose the most convenient and needed service and products that they desire. If the utilities and the regulators are going to be able to respond to customers' wants and needs in this future innovative marketplace, it requires a regulatory environment and framework that can move relatively quickly and one that provides utilities with that flexibility. So really we can, if we have the experience and the collaboration, we really can are the keys to improving the lives of all Ohioans. So thank you.
Good morning, everybody. And I just want to thank you all for inviting me to speak, obviously Chairman, Commissioners, and Commission staff. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk today. So as the Chairman mentioned, my name is Phil Dion, and the quick acronym for me is I'm the VP of TBD, and until they change my title, I'm going to keep saying that. And what I would say to you is, as I tell a lot of folks who come and say, well, what does the future look like? I say, well, let me turn around and grab the book of VP of TBD, and shockingly, there isn't one, right? And I think this is what the Commission is trying to address as well. There is a lot of things that we can rely on, both as working at Commission staff and commissioners, about some of the principles of which we've kind of hung our hat on. But some of those things, as we all know, are changing and changing rapidly and are outside of our control, and we've got to adapt to them. And so, without too much platitudes to the Commission, I'd like to thank you as somebody who sometimes tries to think of all the opportunities and, quite frankly, sometimes is burdened with some of the thoughts of what the future might look like, for taking a holistic approach As I looked at the Power Forward agenda, you've got a lot of things on your plate. But I think one of the things that is imperative and really came through and separates this particular proceeding as it's moved forward and arrived at today is that view. In my experience, sometimes we get laser focused in on specific issues, and we address those issues the best we can, and we do what we can do for the public interest. But there are unintended consequences that come with thinking through those particular issues in that way. And so I do really appreciate this. What I would say briefly as I was preparing for this is, and I'm sorry that you're stuck with me and no slides, but I think I told you I don't know all the answers, and so I don't presume to have a slide deck to give you all of those. But just some thoughts, and I do get the pleasure of seeing a large system, right? AEP is in 11 states, and my history is not in, as you all know, with necessarily AEP my whole life. And I got to see a lot of things in the desert Southwest. And so what I would say is some of the lessons that I've learned and some of the things that you're thinking through what the future looks like is there are kind of multiple roles that are going to be played by the utility. Joe talked a little bit about it and you've heard, there is a planning mechanism that makes a lot of sense. And there's an optimization that I think we heard yesterday I talk a lot about, at least in the morning on electric vehicles. I don't want it to sound like a traffic cop role, but there is an element to that. The utility may not tell you what car to drive or how big it should be or whether it should have 2 doors or 4 doors. But when the light goes red, you got to stop. And so there's an element to, and something that you all are going to have to do as you think through this and you do this traditionally, you balance competing interests. But you're going to have to balance a lot more than you once did because the significance of running that red light is going to be change because of the choices and the other things that consumers will, and I definitely agree with that, but that will have. But you all are still in charge of a couple of things, including reliability. And one of the things that I think we talked about tangentially throughout the week, but I'm just going to say the words as an old commission staffer, that thing called the public interest. And so there is an element to this in which there are solutions that can be brought forth by third parties in competitive aspects. I would submit that those things can be done jointly sometimes. But there are still elements that we have to do under our, really the traditional principles and obviously the things that we want to move forward to, we've still got to take care of, and I would say that. So there's an element to the utility, as I said, that's kind of the traffic cop. There's an element to it in the public interest portion. But I think Joe talked a little bit about the enabler. And as I kind of think through that, if I'd had a better guidance counselor, I might have had a better, I might have been a rock star, who knows, right? But there's a portion of the utility that I think needs to be the guidance counselor as well. And we need to send the right signals, not just to the customers, but to folks like Deborah and to technology companies as to what we want. And that's only really going to happen through the regulatory framework in which Joe talked about. And so when we talk a lot about the technological infrastructure and all these changes, I remind folks the regulatory infrastructure needs to be thought through as well, and I'm glad you're doing it. Commissioner Jones yesterday mentioned this, and I want to kind of highlight something he said. I think, and again, I do not, Hisham, I appreciate that I certainly don't speak for AEP, and as a matter of fact, perhaps might have even been hired to not be like AEP. But one of the things that I think I would say is that as we think through the planning aspect of this, and as customers do have more choice, and as those choices are independent generally of system planning, we're going to have to think through how a customer can optimize the system or optimize for themselves while also either not harming and or perhaps even helping optimize the system. Because if we don't do that now, then we'll have a lot of unintended consequences. And I don't necessarily want to pick on other countries, especially ones that might serve Deborah, but One of the things that I don't think Germany wanted was higher costs and increased CO2 emissions. Yet that's what they got. So if we don't have a planning aspect in conjunction with some of the competitive things that we know are coming, then we are going to entail unintended consequences. And those are the things that I think we all want to avoid for all customers, because higher bills, things like that doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't serve the infrastructure that we did. So going back to what Commissioner Jones said, the 30, we've talked about the fact that Ohio doesn't necessarily have IRPs, but I would submit to you that a 30-year or a 25-year IRP is something that really needs to be reconsidered. The technology is just advancing too fast. And 5 years is about as far out as anybody can even sort of reliably predict. I couldn't even tell you what the prices of batteries will be in the next 5 years, right? We all have our guesses. But living through some of the solar issues in Arizona from 2008 to 2015, I would have never assumed that the prices would go from 18 cents to somewhere around 6 in that rapid period of time. And so basing decisions and 10-year, 15-year outlooks on some of the things you have, I would suggest 5 years is about the right time, and or if you're going to have a long-term plan, have a refresh rate that is, and by that I mean your policy refresh rate in that same period of time, because so much is changing. The other thing is that all these things that Deborah and Joe talked about and all the things that we all talk about, those are very, for the most part, simple things from the customer level to integrate, but in the aggregate, as I mentioned, the planning is sometimes difficult to work through. One of the things that I think the Commission should also think through if we're trying to get some of these things through the customer and into the hands of the customer is, and as somebody who's been a part of these things and understands the history of them, I do say this just to provoke some thought, but we generally added large, massive, multi-year, capital, intensive projects to the system. And the review of that was significant. I mean, as somebody used to do that, that's not something I could have done in 2 months, or any commission staff could have done in 2 months. And so we created a rate case process and that review of that and all of that. I'm going to suggest that maybe those things aren't going to be added to the system as often. And quite frankly, other things are going to be needed to add it to the system more incrementally, more modularly, and quicker. And so as you think through how that works, one of the things that I think we talked about and Joe talked about is the regulatory infrastructure around that probably needs to change. The other thing that you're going to need is you're going to need to be, we as the utility are going to be needing to be more flexible, and that will come directly from some of those things that I talked about. I think one of the things that this panel is supposed to address is kind of, okay, if we're moving towards a platform, and who can play and how will the world work? Again, I don't know that I have all the answers, but I will tell you that I think that while there will still be a competitive element, and there always has been, right? Utilities have purchased PPAs, even vertically integrated utilities do that. So there's always a competitive element that inures to the benefit of our customers. One of the things, though, I think that will happen and is happening is there is a good period of uncertainty going on, and the marketplaces may or may not be developing. I harken back to yesterday's conversation where we talked about electric vehicle charging stations and especially the fast chargers. They don't pencil, and so if they don't pencil, no one shows up, and should the utility do it? All those things are things that you're going to have to think through, but as you think through them, what I would suggest is, as we move forward in that example, and we say, oh, these electric vehicles, and they don't pencil because the demand charge and the utilization rates are low. Well, one of the things that might happen in the future is that the battery of the EV might beget more batteries. I think batteries will be located at those DC fast charging stations. And from there, you're going to be able to utilize and optimize and do a whole bunch of other things. Now, who should own those batteries? Those are all the questions that you'll have to answer. Those large-scale batteries that probably will be able to help the system, those probably look a little bit more like what a utility would traditionally do. But the other part about it is that I think that the utilities and some of these competitive, if you will, competitive suppliers or third parties or innovative solution providers, whatever we want to call them, from my perspective, I think that they're going to partner with utilities more or as much as they won't. And I've seen that a little bit in my tenure and in my journey, especially through Arizona. Right? There was a great fight between a solar leasing company and the utility, and what was fair and what was unfair, and you don't value the grid. And now that same company is trying to sell things to that utility, right? And then a suite of packages and other things that is going on. And I think that that's a likely scenario, because in the scenario where a competitive supplier like Deborah provides, she may provide a battery for a customer to help with demand charges. I might be interested in, as the utility, in using that battery for frequency response. And I might purchase that service from her because that benefits my customers, because otherwise I would have to pay that either through PJM or whatever other market you might be in. Or Deborah and I could go halvesies, and I could provide some of the capital and purchase some of those things. So I think one of the things that I'd like to say, or at least get through, is that while the regulatory infrastructure certainly has to change, and we all can talk about that, one of the things that I think is going to be most beneficial to customers is to think through how those changes will really affect it. We can't think necessarily, as we move forward, about generation, transmission, and distribution in those single silos. The technologies are blurring those lines, and they're blurring them quickly. I'd also suggest, and this is just my suggestion, this is certainly not American Electric Power's suggestion, that we will be solving questions that we've kind of traditionally solved, but we're going to add in some nuances. So for example, in a traditional IRP, we generally solve for energy and capacity. That's what we did. As we move forward, the answer to that might still be capacity, probably will be, but it might also be emissions. That actually might be something that we are going to be called upon to solve, and or the state may choose to ask us to solve for. And those things do go hand in hand somewhat as to the future that you've heard about between renewables and electric vehicles, right? We can all tie those two things together. But I think the thing that was important about it is, especially as you think through it, is how do we plan so that the electric vehicle doesn't add to the peak or anything? So the example that I give generally is, if you have a lot of solar in the system, which I would love to have in Ohio, by the way, and if I could bring a little more sunshine to our state, I certainly would, because I do miss it. But the solar production, as we know, is about 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Then it disappears. It just does. The sun just sets with shocking regularity. It's really amazing. But as it does so, when people come home and plug in their vehicles, right, the thing that worries me the most are the slopes on the system. And that's a concern that the utility has. It's not necessarily a concern, unless we build it into the pricing, that folks who are purchasing solar panels or buying an EV, or even folks that provide those things, have. And so I think one of the things that we definitely have to think through is that we want to give the customers the choice, but again, we can't sub-optimize for the system or create other costs on the system in order to get to that. But that's something that you all do all the time. You balance competing interests like that all the time. I think what I would say, just quickly, because I really think this has got to be more of a discussion, and I've seen this panel list as about presentation as opposed to a dialogue with the commissioners. But I think that one of the things that when you're thinking through all of this is that probably the thing that I don't want to lose again is the reliability and the safe and the affordable and the public interest. But the traditional role of the utility necessarily and wholly needing to be separate from some of the competitive suppliers and products, I think you're going to leave a lot of value on the table if you do that. And if you don't allow for the utility to work with some of these folks, besides the technology companies, but also the folks that provide some of these things, and provide not only just the system benefits that we always talk about, but the consumer benefits, and do it in a way in which those things can come together, I think you're going to move the ball forward faster than if you do them in silos, because what will happen is that the certain products and services will then inure or create new additional problems that we will come to the commission to talk about, and then we'll have to set up a new rate design. And then the customer who purchased a product and relied upon that product, now all of a sudden they don't understand why a rate changes or a rate design changes or a system peak. All they know is they bought something and now all of a sudden it's changed on them. Those are the things that I think that we can avoid. But again, it's not going to be a surprise to you that I stand up here as AEP saying the utility should be involved. But I would suggest to you that there are benefits to customers our involvement greater than just simply system planning and reliability and public interest and sort of the things that we always talk about, low-income customers. There are benefits in if we can start thinking through some of these things and partnering with people and hybridizing, and not to steal from Deborah's slide, but Uberizing parts of the system. Leave that the final thought. If everybody's going to drive a battery and drive it in their home, shouldn't we be trying to take advantage of, if you will, that asset that they've already purchased and figure out a way to create more value for them and reduce the costs or reduce the cost of the system? So again, I apologize that I don't have any of the solutions, but I do really appreciate you trying to think through this in a very holistic manner, because I think that's the way you're going to get the most value for customers.
Phil, thank you very much. Okay, so let me just put, let me take commission chair hat off and let me just put disruptor hat on, okay? So, thought or theory. The utilities should be nothing but wires companies because they're not good at innovating. You've provided a partial response to that, which is you think that things will happen faster if the utilities are, in fact, involved. Talk a little bit about what level of involvement you think that should be. So we've had a look into the planning perspective clearly, and let me just level set by saying I don't think anyone up here is saying take the wires away from the utilities, challenge the conventional norms of the service that we provide today, which is reliable, resilient buzzword. Take that away from the utilities. I don't think anyone up here has said that or thinks that. But I think as we dive into this, what should this marketplace look like? I think there is both on one side, a fear that the utilities do too much, create monopolies, are slow to the innovative, are slow to innovate. I also think that there is a perspective where one could say, well, have we in the competitive retail space experienced the kind of innovation that we had hoped we had to see by this point? Is it the Commission's fault for failure to create a proper regulatory framework for that? Are the Amazons and Googles and Apples of the world going to partner with you, or are they going to partner with the competitive retailer, or are they going to, or will there be no movement in the space because we don't create the right framework for them? I mean, these are the types of questions that we're grappling with. Who are going to be the participants in this space? We've been talking about generation, transmission, and distribution are blurred. That's a lovely concept, but that is also like we live in a world where there are walls, okay? And FERC has a wall, and states have a wall, and PJM has a wall. And so you know, I guess I'm just looking for, I think I'm looking for a little more. I'm looking for you to unpack this a little bit more. And Phil, let me start with you, okay? We've known each other for a little while. I know that you are. I'm sure right now AEP is shaking in their shoes about what you may or may not say. But I mean, let me ask you this: you're a former commission staffer. I mean, what level of involvement should utilities have in the marketplace that we're trying to create? And if all of this is being blurred, well, then what are we supposed to do about creating that marketplace, and where are the lines of demarcation?
So I'll start with, you want me on that wall.
Yes.
You need me, okay.
I
So
want the truth. I want the truth, Dion.
you can't handle, all right,
Yeah, exactly.
so my resume will be online later after, please look it up on LinkedIn. So what I would say is, I don't think AEP is going to be shocked by what I say, because we struggle with the same thing. I mean, what are some of our core competencies, right? What are the things that we really do well, and quite frankly, what are our competitive advantages? Regarding the monopoly, first of all, I would argue that our monopoly status is a waning monopoly status. We're in that period, and we recognize that. Yet, you know, we still do have all those responsibilities that I mentioned. I think on the innovation side, right, as the resident dinosaur or whatever I am, there's a couple things to that, in my opinion. The first is, you say, well, you're never gonna, you won't innovate. The utilities will never innovate. Well, I would argue that the utilities have been fairly innovative to get us to the point that we are right now. The other, not to hearken too much on the regulatory issues, but as I've tried to be innovative, and I've talked with commissions, or I've seen innovative things and worked with commissions, you know, one of the issues is that, quite frankly, if I take a developer's risk and I walk in here and I hit a home run, I will get a regulated utilities reward. And there's a big delta between those two. And so it's kind of hard for me to walk into the folks that control the capital budget and say, let's do this thing, and the compared to what return isn't commensurate, and or there's opportunity costs that I leave on there, and or, right, I get to hold the bag if the whole thing goes bad. So if you want more innovation, right, there are things that you can do, certainly as the regulator, to say, these are the things we want to work on. We understand that there are greater risks inherent in that, and we are willing to do that, and or you'll work with us, and because we are going to provide some safety nets, you will share some of the benefits with your customers. That's one thing. That's kind of just a real financial thought, or view into that. The second thing about this, as far as innovations go, is that, at least from my perspective, there's a reason that commissions and utilities like pilots, and we can come up with a better word for it. Yeah. But we like those things, and we like them because they generally cap what can happen, right? So we're going to be naturally, both of us, a little bit risk averse, but those pilots allow for the establishment, right, of the marketplaces. So what I would say is that the commissions, and I'll use an example, a real world example for me. In the state that I was in, we had a renewable portfolio standard. It wasn't called that, it had a different name, but that's what it was. And what happened is that the standard went out, and there were supposed to be these procurements, and nothing happened, really. A lot of things were talked about. We called them bragawatts, mostly a bragawatt project over here or a bragawatt project over there. But they didn't occur. But when the utilities started getting involved, and quite frankly, their financing mechanism got involved, then a lot more started happening. So what I'd suggest to you, Chairman, is that as you think through these new markets and marketplaces, having the utility start the market, having them participate, probably makes a lot of sense. And then at some point, you, as the regulator, say, okay, that's enough, because quite frankly, you still do regulate the utility, and you can. You say, that's enough. Now we're going to change the rules, and we're going to open things up. I think that makes a lot of sense on both innovation and policy perspectives. There are a number of states that have precluded the utility from doing things, only to come back 180 and say, okay, get involved. And I think that the establishment of the market in a smart, thoughtful way then inures to the benefits of the customers, because we can go through some of these things and kind of take, I'm not going to say take developers' risks, but we can kind of take some of those risks, do it in a way that's thoughtful, and then you begin to say, okay, now it's time to open it up. And the developers, in my case, right, some of the developers can take advantage of the tax advantages and the ITC, investment tax credits, and this is cheaper for our customers, and actually that's a good thing. And now that we own some and we've purchased some, our balance sheet isn't as affected. So those are my, and I'm sorry for the long drawn out question, but I've thought about that a lot. And you can either incentivize us to do this, or we can participate at a kind of at a pilot level, get the market going. And then you've always got the ability to say, okay, now we're doing that. What you're stuck with is, if you rely on just simply, the market to do it, again, you may get some answers, you may not, but you also may get some answers that are only for certain classes, and you're going to have to work through, how you're going to ensure that, cost subsidies or there isn't a unjust or an unfair treatment of customers, because while there is not an average customer, right, there's no such thing as an average customer, we still have to serve all of those customers, and we should do so in a way that allows for the greatest participation for all of them, as opposed to, certain segments get certain things.
Yeah, let me just make this point also, which is, we don't know what the application that's going to change the world is going to be through this whole grid mod process, right? I think it would be so much easier to make the case for grid mod if we had that application and then started working backwards, okay? But I think that in order to get to that application, you have to do some of this fundamental work from both a physical grid perspective as well as a regulatory framework perspective. So the point, this is not a question for you, the point I'm going to make is, what we expect is that we will partner with distribution utilities to, especially on the physical side, create that environment that will allow for innovation to flourish. The question then becomes, what role do you play with the innovation side, and where are the lines of demarcation? And then go to Deborah. And I'm really curious about that particular question about, again, the lines of demarcation. You are the CEO of a competitive retailer. You are an end-use provider, behind-the-meter provider of commodity plus, okay?
Yes.
Is that the lines of demarcation, we've heard now a few times, this is all getting blurred. We heard it from Roger Smith from Oracle. We heard it from Sai, from Engie. I mean, where does your company sit in trying to figure out where the lines of demarcation are anymore?
And I think you were saying earlier that it feels to me like the role of the utility should be reliability, the grid operation, and enabling the innovation to occur. So the regulatory framework, and I agree with you, and I'm not a regulatory person, so I'm kind of, you guys know a lot more about this structure than I do, but I can tell you, if I take a step back and say, what really enables, who's best suited to bring innovation to the table. I just think that the speed at which we're talking about, given where things are going and how fast things are moving, I just don't see a utility being that innovator. And not saying we couldn't partner and figure out ways to work together. I just, in my opinion, given how fast I see things going, and I feel like I can't keep up. So, and I have nobody telling me I can't, tomorrow do a smart home product. I can't keep up because it's going faster than I can go. And so that's I think the crux of the situation here is, I believe that utilities have a role to play in this, and I think it's about the traffic cop is a great example because you want order, but when you flip to the innovation side, I just don't see a way that happens just based on speed. And I think that, whether it's every 5 years or a rate case and how do we get paid for it, I mean, you got to break that mold, right? So it's really how, you guys are running a company. That's really, at the end of the day, you have shareholders. You've got to run a company, so your motivation is slightly differently aligned than having all of these things flourish sometimes. Because it's like, okay, how do I get protected if I make an investment? How do I, and that's, I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about, okay, how can I get a customer to be excited and delighted about their experience, and how can I make their lives easier, and how can I make them spend less by giving them energy efficiency?
Okay, so, all right, good thought. Let me follow up with a comment that you made. So, what I'm concerned about is everything that we are doing here is to try to better the lives of customers. Mm-hmm. Everything that we're doing. We are not trying to help the utilities. We're not trying to help you. We're not trying to help any of the stakeholders in the room. Now, we all come from different backgrounds and we all have our proclivities. At this point in my time at the commission, I actually don't trust in like anybody in the room. I'm kidding, mostly. But let me ask you this. What if it's not any of you? What if it is a third-party tech? I shouldn't use third party. I got disciplined for this early on. Mm-hmm. What if it is Amazon? All right. What if it is Amazon that comes up with the thing that is the best application for customers to advance, to better society, and it's not just energy, and it's not AEP, and it's not AES. What does that marketplace look like? How would you fit into a marketplace like that?
I kind of feel like if I don't deserve to exist, I shouldn't. So
say that again?
If I don't deserve to exist, then I shouldn't.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So if I can't bring some value or do something, then I shouldn't be here. So I don't have a right to any of my customers. I had to earn all of them. Yeah. So I think that nuance of that perspective. So if Amazon come and kicks my butt, then they might, but I have to, in order to deliver these products to customers, the way I look at it is remove as many barriers as possible to people like me or Amazon or others to come in and address, okay, this is what we see. We see an inefficiency here. Let's fix it. Let's help a customer change the way they use energy in their home. It's like we're still protecting I need to get a certain number of megawatt hours that are flowing through. I need to get a certain return, and that's not what the customer's thinking about. So I agree with you. Amazon might, at the end of the day, everybody's afraid of Amazon now. Grocery stores, everybody. But I'm not afraid of it because, if we have the right mentality associated with we have to be the one who, if we don't deserve to exist, then we shouldn't. So.
Yeah. And I don't think this is the right question for this panel, but for the next panel, or the next couple panels, I really want you to think about whether or not companies like Amazon, Apple, Google should be certified at the PUCO, or if we are going to then create way too many barriers to allow for this technology to proliferate and better the lives of customers, and think about it from the lens of if they are the actual disruptors, if they are the disruptors that are going to change customers' lives, well then your honest answer today, you may end up being acquired by Amazon. Who the heck knows? I mean, I don't think any of us know what this is going to look like 10 years from now. Bentley,
Yes.
welcome back to Power Forward.
Thank you very much.
This is all 3 phases for you?
Yes, it is.
Well, you have also
tired of
earned.
seeing me?
You also get to be a Jedi like Jeff Taft. Okay, look, I've appreciated all of your presentations. They all look somewhat similar.
Uh-huh.
Okay, talk to me specifically about the marketplace. Okay, so what is the AES perspective? Does in front of the meter, behind the meter matter anymore to you? And whatever other sort of outside of the box thinking from the AES company / DPL company.
Yeah, so to answer your question, I think the utility has dual roles here, okay? So we talked about safety and reliability, okay? So when we think about the building blocks, in 1 and 2 in terms of from the substation going out into the distribution grid, having that visibility. We talk about systems today, so we talk about, distribution management systems, and we talk about DERM systems, close to the customer premise. The reality, you need to have visibility across that entire distribution system to be able to manage it effectively. Now, you think about this, again, we were talking about a one-way linear system in the past. Now we're talking about plug and play across that distribution system. So you think about utilities, they're really good at planning. They're really good at really understanding kind of the physics behind how to do this. And the reality of that is you need that level of expertise to understand where to put and plug and play those things, where to incentivize those to be on the system. The distribution system is going to change so much over the next few years, and to really understand how to manage that. And utilities have done that great for years and will continue to do that. Now, I would say, as it gets closer to the customer premise, I hear this that utilities don't innovate, or they can't innovate. I don't necessarily agree with that, okay? I spent time in private equity, in venture capital, in the energy space, okay? I looked at thousands of business plans in terms of entrepreneurs, and I don't necessarily buy in that utilities can't innovate. The reality is, as you point out, it's all about customers, okay? So give customers what they want. At the end of the day, let them decide what they want, and who can provide the economies of scale and the technological advancements to do that. Being a part of a global company, we're able to bring technology and the integration of technology, whether it's the combination of solar and batteries, to really have an effective solution from a capacity and an energy perspective in different markets. So at the end of the day, we bring a global company that brings innovation and technology. All I'm saying is allow us to be able to provide that to the customer and let them decide.
Allow you to be able to provide it in a regulated or unregulated fashion.
Allow us to be able to compete in that market. So I'm not saying necessarily. Now, if to be able to jumpstart that market, you need regulation to do that, to get it to a point where it can compete, we're willing to do that. I think Phil's talked about that in the past.
Look, I think we could create basically retail marketplace 2.0, but I don't think that is not nearly as adventurous enough, I think, for what we're talking about here. And I guess I don't need to be the Steve Jobs of regulation, right? I mean, that's not the point here. But I don't know that if you're a retailer and you are on the Power Forward agenda, it's because the commission appreciates that you have tried to do something more. Okay, but I can't say that I think the retail marketplace has advanced in the manner that we thought it would advance and has provided the types of benefits that we thought it would. And from a utility perspective, I think the part of the problem is that now we're talking about innovation, but the dialogue over here the last 3 years has been really painful. Okay, and so this is the conundrum that it presents. And I joke that I don't know that I trust anybody in the room, but maybe with you've got these third-party tech providers that are out there that are really hoping to break into the space and provide benefit to customers. Maybe, and I have actually seen it from the utilities. I have seen a change in mentality. I've seen a change in both words and actions of how you are proceeding in talking about your business and talking about the customers that you serve. I don't think I'm going to say anything else. Probably said enough. But for not just this panel, but for other panels, just think about some of the questions that I've asked, because I'd love to get some more. I'd love to get some more perspective. I'm going to turn things over to Larry. Larry, go ahead.
Will you, sir? I'm sorry, I said such really bright things that you all missed. I wanted to come at this a little bit more in terms of the chairman's statements, and he made an observation that the retail market hasn't evolved as was expected, and I characterize that as suboptimal, certainly not a failure, and I might attribute that to a definition of roles, which is the segue, I guess, into my question. And that is this, that, Joe, you quoted an earlier presenter who said that the meter is artificial barrier. And it may be, and to the chairman's point, it may have been a traditional line of demarcation. But what it is a window into consumer behavior and consumer consumption. So as I've been sitting here and thinking about all of this for the past 8 months or so, I don't know, Christina, it seems to me the grid mod falls into system-facing and consumer-facing applications. And as we talk about the appropriate roles going forward, the question in my mind is how prescriptive should we be? Because to your point, Phil, to be determined, right? It's a journey, it's not a destination. And is the appropriate barometer or test the traditional test, not of the meter as a line of demarcation, but the provision of what would appear to be a natural monopoly service? Phil, you indicated that traditionally utilities haven't really been rewarded for risk. Well, that's the paradigm that you have existed in historically, and you may be able to accomplish the return on the investment through an affiliate, which is non-regulated and plays on a level playing field with people such as Deborah and the rest. And Deborah, I appreciate your Darwinian perspective on either you survive or you don't. I really do appreciate that. So here's the question, guys. I'm sorry. Is the concept of traditional monopoly service the more appropriate one to keep us from being overly prescriptive, but yet consistent with the purpose for the regulatory existence?
Gonna start?
All right, I'll go.
One of the utility guys.
There we go. So, Commissioner, what I would say is that, and this again is just kind of perhaps how I was brought up through my regulatory career, is the Commission stood in the place of competition. That's the role when faced with a natural monopoly, right? Because that was the deal. You know, to your point, right? Not to quote another great movie, but this is the business we've chosen, right? So there was an element to that, because in the beginning of electricity, way back, right? So if you had a bunch of competing, quite frankly, and that's what was going on, competing electric companies, a couple of things happened, right? Duplication of costs in the system, and the service quality, right? Everybody wanted to serve New York, everybody wanted to serve Chicago, maybe Winnemucca, Nevada was lower on the totem pole, so to speak, right? So there was a natural reason for that. I think dividing, and what makes sense is dividing those things that the Commission feels, I mean, Chairman Hawk, said it, right? There are certain things we know that it just doesn't make sense to do this, right? We've seen other states embark upon this and kind of come to those conclusions, so we can move quickly there. But here are the things that natural monopolies should do. This is the way they should be rewarded, and this is a part of it. I don't know that, and I think what Joe was saying, I don't know that necessarily means that the utility cannot provide other things, be it through a competitive affiliate or something else, or in situations where the Commission deems that, hey, these are the rules and we're playing by the rules, but when the rules are counter to the best interest of the customer, then that's where the rules are getting in the way, and we can't allow that to happen. And I think that's up to us as the utilities to tell you about those things, right? We would really like to put a battery here instead of a substation. It's cheaper, and it solves a lot of other things. But those other things kind of step on the toes of others. We need to talk to you about that, and we need to bring those things up. So I think there's there are those natural elements that you talked about that still exist. My only, and I think I heard a little bit from Joe, mine only is to preclude the utility in some way, shape, or form, whether it's through the regulated arm, whether it's through a tariff that's not regulated but still a tariff that the Commission has jurisdiction over, or whether it's through an unregulated affiliate. All those options certainly should be open, to me, to preclude any of those options is just to preclude a customer a choice, and may leave value on the table. But there still is that natural role that the commission has to play, because you don't want an unfettered monopoly.
I think that, just to add maybe a little bit, from my perspective, in today's environment and how consumer and technology is changing so quickly, breaking those two things apart. So like going back to, okay, the monopoly is really the wires, right? So the monopoly isn't the customer or the territory. The monopoly is the distribution system. And how can we reward utilities for optimizing that, for finding innovative ways to make that work better? But to me, the line of demarcation is whether, and I'm not saying utilities can't have an unregulated affiliate with that's a dangerous slope, but there's something there where maybe there's something that utilities can have that, but I think the customer-facing side of it is really, that's the line of demarcation for me. So the monopoly is everything up to the customer. And then beyond that, to me, should be competitive, wholly competitive. And that's where you get the innovation, because then Amazon will come in and say, oh, I can, aggregate these 5 customers together and do this, or I can put a little pod here and I don't even know what they're going to come up with, or I'm going to come up with. So that to me is a line of demarcation.
Larry, do you mind if I?
No, I'm done.
What about the battery in front of the meter? We had a whole presentation yesterday about energy storage, and you reiterated it today. The concept of, let us say that an appropriate cost benefit is done. It aligns with the principles that come out of Power Forward to actually allow for this battery to exist in front of the meter.
For the purposes of shaving off peak?
Yeah, for
and improving the cost
variety
of
of
the
purposes,
distribution
yeah.
system?
Yep.
Absolutely. You think about reliability.
Yep.
So from my perspective, if the utility is 100% focused on innovation on the grid and optimization using technology like batteries to say, I know I've got a congestion issue here. If I put this battery here, I can now all of a sudden smooth that out, which, by the way, lowers my costs, and I can potentially make a few points more on my distribution system monopoly because I am smart and I've innovated to find a way to do that. That shouldn't impact the customer at all. So the customer, that the distribution rates and what the customer pays for that service of the delivery, you might have the utility companies motivated to find savings and sharing them, find efficiencies and sharing them using technology or something like that. Because I think that there's something there. I feel like we're mixing two things together. We're trying to go an inch forward with, okay, we have the customer side, which is moving way too fast for anybody to try to do in a regulated environment, in my opinion, or a semi-regulated environment. And you have everything up until that point, which is really safety, reliability, efficiency, using technology around that. I think that makes total sense.
Okay, we're going to free flow this, okay? So if you have a question based upon the question, then just jump in. Howard,
Chairman,
you're up.
I'd like to address that one real quick, if I mind.
Real quick.
Yeah, okay. Just to understand, I was surprised yesterday with the EV panel. I mean, they said they need utilities. Why? Because they need to be able to have us to help jumpstart those markets, okay, until it becomes competitive. So we can play a role in a monopolistic way if the market wants us to do that. I'm not saying could be that way forever, but we may play a role in that. And then once it gets to be competitive, allow us to compete for customers just like anyone else. But that blurred line, I don't think there is a sharp line of demarcation at the meter, okay? The reality is you, as the commission, can determine how best to use the utilities to help jumpstart or to optimize some of these markets until they really become competitive.
Yeah. Okay. And well, Howard, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to follow up with Deborah on the example, just to, because it quickly gets down into the details. So we'll take your example. We've put the battery up there, and following from Commissioner Conway, the primary use of the battery is because it eliminates the putting in a substation. So it's 85% for distribution services. But the battery is sitting there, and it can be used in the frequency market, and that's a very competitive market. Do you let them do you let that battery go into the frequency market? And if so, do you have to then tag the dollars that come back?
So I think you do, because you don't want to get half of the benefit associated with the investment you put in there. But again, that's not the customer side, right? That's another service on the wholesale grid, if I'm understanding you correctly, right? So that's not, I'm demarcating the customer and the products with the customer and serving a customer from everything before that. And so how a utility gets return on that investment, it should be able to get everything, in my opinion.
And how it's pushed back to customers.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
but if the customer isn't part of the utility, then it could be back to shareholders. It could be back to the rate payers. You're right, on the T&D side.
So, Mr. Chairman, I will try to be helpful, doubtful, but we'll see what I can do here. So, what's an electric vehicle charger? That seems to me customer facing. We heard that they're not going to be out there. One of the things the commission could think through is, in order to jumpstart these if you believe that the market can take care of these things, then work with us utilities, right? I talked about our little 5-year plan or something, whatever that is. We'll issue the RFPs, and if the market shows up, the market shows up. But if it doesn't, then you do have the utility as a backstop to do some of these things as well. That's another way that you could attack things that you think the market should take care of, but you're just unsure if that market is going to show up. And then eventually, those assets can be, again, you can change the rules afterwards. So I think there are different ways that you can do that. Additionally, just so that I can say it, I don't want to forget Exxon or Mobil or Shell. They are actively thinking through this as well. And so the other final thing is that, again, you have the ability to do some of these things, and you have the ability to treat things differently. And I don't want to get into the rate side too much, but as you're thinking through all of these things, a lot of the things that we hold near and dear might have to change. Why is the monthly charge the same for every residential customer? Well, there's a reason for that, right? Could we change that a little bit? Could we say low-income customers are this, somebody like this, or somebody that uses the system differently gets a different charge? So you can also push innovation through the utility through a different pricing structure, and that's going to, I understand what that entails, right? I've been through the rate cases. But again, innovation, I really don't want to lose point. Innovation is not only going to take place in the whiz-bang stuff that does things, it's also going to take place in the price signals that you send to the market and how those things are going to be done. I just would suggest to you that a time of use rate from 7 a.m. until 11 p.m. is probably not how we want to move forward in order to deal with the things that I've talked about, which I think are going to revolve more around capacity than energy. And so I just don't want to lose sight of that. But again, I wanted to offer that as kind of I don't know if it was Solomonic or anything, but issue the RFP, and then if nothing happens, it's agreed that the utility can fill that role. Set out the time frame, whatever the parameters are. That might be a way for you to see some of the things that I think that you'd like to see happen and get us more towards some of those solutions that I think you've talked about.
Who's up? Good questions only. All right, I'm going to be your judge and jury.
You can tell me to quiet down if
Okay,
you like.
go ahead.
I am very fascinated with the battery question again, if I might add dig a little bit deeper. So especially for the incumbent utilities. So if you have a battery that is for reliability, and that's the investment, but the utility also ends up using it in the wholesale market, in the frequency market, and generating 15% of the revenues or 15% of its cost from the wholesale market. Would you agree to then, and of course, that's a very difficult question to give me a yes or a no, just go through the logic. Would you agree to then get from recovery from the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio only 85% of the cost?
That's a fantastic question, right? And so I'm going to take so I should answer the staff question, but I'm going to make it a little bit more complicated. Let's say that I can sell it into the frequency response. Let's say I need it for reliability, and let's say I locate it at a Home Depot or a wall or near a Walgreens or whatever, and there's a FEMA element to this now. Right now, I can plan for milk, water, ice, and medicine being up and running in certain communities, right? And there might be a value to a Kroger or a Walgreens or someone to pay that. So I think that there's actually more ways that we can get we can extract value out of that. I think we can have the customer pay some of it. I think that we can socialize a portion of it, and then I think we can offset some of the PJM costs that I might otherwise pay and share those with the customer. I think it's open. I mean, I think as long as I'm open to thinking through that, I'm not just simply limited to saying, I'm putting in a battery and I want everybody to pay for it. I can take that example and maybe offset some to a customer that might be interested in that service, but I might also be able to participate in the PJM marketplace. So I think that it becomes more complex, but with that complexity, I think that you can extract more value out of those assets, and you can either do it in a way that, in my example, might help a particular community, and or it just might help the system. So I think all of those things are possible, but in my example, where 85% is paid, I mean, my recollection is we pay into the frequency market, right, AEP, and then if we were to use that battery, right, to do that, why wouldn't I offset what I'm paying into the PJM marketplace? That seems to be a pretty much a good idea, because I'm hedging against what those frequency costs are. Then again, I'm going to put if I put that battery in, and the frequency costs go down, right? Then I'll get Monday morning quarterbacked a little bit on why did you put that battery in and it's not producing the revenue it was supposed to produce. I think we'd have to come to an agreement with the commission, but I think that that's one that can make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. What may not be 85%, maybe it's full recovery, and you pass the ancillary service cost back. Ultimately, you can pick and choose and decide how you want to allocate that. But we're open to anything at this point in time to allow us to be able to do what's right for us in the future. And ultimately, it might not be the utility per se. It could be a situation where the customer decides to locate that, and you provide the right price incentive to be able to locate that at a place on the grid, the distribution grid, that you really need it at that point in time. So there's a lot of variance that you can actually play here going forward. But we're open to exploring all of those different models.
Well, it's a very interesting conversation. It's as Chairman Hawk, I think, explained, it's one that we've been grappling with since the outset here. I have an observation and maybe a question that comes out of the observation from my perspective after listening for all these months. It seems to me that what we'd like to have is like a unified theory of regulation, innovation, and customer empowerment through choice, one that provides a flexible, adaptable, yet future-proofed approach, and one that ensures reliable and adequate service to all customers at reasonable prices. So we'd like the unified theory, and we're waiting for someone to come up with it, but I suspect we might not get one theory that, comprehensively, accurately addresses all the objectives we have. But maybe we can come up with principles and objectives that help to guide us in our evaluation of specific applications, specific proposals. The other observation I have is that most of our conversations about the really high-minded or the unified theory type questions that we pose to you ends up migrating towards discussions about specific circumstances that you can see are on the horizon and that we might need to evaluate. So are we at the end of the day going to have a model, a policy, a set of practices that lead us towards a fair, accurate, productive way of achieving the goals and principles in individual circumstances that we face. Now, are we going to actually tackle this whole project through individual kind of circumstances and cases? And should that be should we be satisfied with that, or are we trying to, or do we want to try to achieve something different, more comprehensive than that?
So as you were speaking just now, I was thinking, because that was a really big sentence that you just said. It seems like a lot to do.
The first part of it or the whole thing?
The whole thing. It was
Yeah.
pretty. No, when you said
I tried to
this is what we're trying to
divide
do.
it up. There was a few semicolons. You may have missed them.
It was impressive, and I can see how it's daunting. I wonder if you break it into pieces to say, what are the roles? So you want to accomplish efficiency, reliability, innovation for Ohio, around energy in Ohio. So that's what you want to do. And I wonder if you break it into roles and say, we want the most efficient grid. So there's technology changing. Now that technology is a bit slower to come. You know, you've got batteries that are, the technology is getting better and better. You've got utility scale solar, which is probably not for Ohio given the sunlight, but there are all kinds of things that are happening and technology around the grid and transmission and distribution and metering and things like that. So I look at it and say, that's a piece that it feels like we're trying to talk about the consumer facing piece and the grid piece at the same time. And I wonder if you break it into two pieces and say, here's our goal from, we want to motivate and incentivize utilities to optimize infrastructure and ensure that we accomplish the safety goal and the public good, but we want people to come to Ohio and say, look at what we've been able to do. We've been able to, retire transformers that are, I don't run a grid, so I'm going to speaking a little out of turn, but we want to have the most efficient and best technology that we're able to reduce T&D costs for customers, and utilities are able to make more money. Like, isn't that the best role for that? And then you have the second part, which is the consumer stuff is happening so quickly, breaking those, like kind of breaking the mold and taking, okay, let's attack these two things. How do we incent the consumer facing for energy in the home and businesses? How do we incent that group to make sure they're doing the right thing by consumers, but also bringing in ways and really pushing things that we can know consumers can want? So I wonder if you break it into those two pieces and have the same goal, but and then making sure the motivations and the regulation and the oversight gives utilities the ability to get what they want and to reward them for innovation and things like that, and give the consumers full access to Amazon, Just Energy, whoever can come in.
I think I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but that is actually how I view it. And I think actually if we continue to use the meter as a line of demarcation, I think that everything up to the meter in my mind is actually, I'm not going to say easy, because it's taken us a long time to get to a point to where we were yesterday talking about and asking and answering these questions associated with a very specific example about a battery in front of the meter. I mean, it's taken us a while to even get to that spot, but Power Forward's always been about just a linear line of education for everybody up here. But it's, to me, really, it's that behind the meter piece, and what does that marketplace look like? Maybe it looks like the exact same marketplace as it does today, but if that is the case, then I feel like we have not done anything revolutionary. And so I think that's the part that I think I don't want to speak for everybody up here, but I think that's the part that I think we really struggle with, and how that's going to change. Now, we do have a couple panels later on today that talk about pricing, some granularity, and maybe that will sort of create some different brainwaves for us up here. Any other questions? Christina, go ahead.
Just quickly, Deborah, you mentioned in your slides that data access enables innovation, and then you had a slide of Texas, which kind of recently went to or is in the process of going to Smart Meter Texas to Green Button Connect. We don't have, and we're going to get into this in week 2 of phase 3 of Power Forward, but we don't have full AMI data access for CREST in the state now. We don't even have full AMI rollout. So what is the best way? I mean, we have EDI. Do you think the Green Button Connect is a good move in Texas specifically, or any kind of lessons learned from that, if you were involved at all?
I wasn't involved. But I have people like Jack and others who were very involved. I know I'm from Texas, and I was born and raised in Ohio, just so you guys know. But I look at that market and look what consumers have. It's amazing. And what they did is they said, utilities can have customers for a certain period of time, and then they break apart, and they can keep those customers, but they're separate from the T&D completely. So then that unregulated affiliate, it's different in Texas, right? It's a completely separate company standing on its own, just like I stand on my own. And what you've seen, and a lot of it's enabled through data, because right now for one of my customers in Texas, I have a smart meter on the wall that I can see what the thermostat is set at. I have a smart meter at the home, and I'm not technically understanding Green Button Texas or Smart Meter Texas. I don't know what the pros and cons were. I apologize, I can't answer that question, but I can tell whether a customer's air conditioning is broken, because I can see the meter turning, and I can see the thermostat set at 72, and I can see the temperature in the home is 80. And I can see this thing running constantly. So I can send a text to a customer and say, you have a problem. So those are the kind of things that, that data and access to it, that we can start to pull things together to really impact and solve problems. If that makes sense.
Any others? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. A round of applause for our panelists. As you can see, look, I'm fired up today. I think my colleagues are fired up today, I think. But part of the reason why that is because this is the really, really hard part in my mind, okay? And to finally tally up our a few good men quotes, I want answers, right? And so that's what we're going to be expecting from everybody today. So thank you very much. We're going to break for just 5 minutes, just restroom break for everybody.